This is the Sisters in Therapy podcast. I'm Dr. Mercedes, licensed marriage and family therapy supervisor.
I am Dr. Brittany Harrell, licensed professional counselor.
I am Dr. TK, licensed marriage and family therapy supervisor.
We are inviting you to be a part of our thoughtful, mind-shifting, mental health-related conversations that we have all the time amongst ourselves.
This podcast is not meant to replace your relationship with a licensed therapist. Now, let's get into the session.
Welcome to another session of the Sisters in Therapy podcast. Today we are talking about the impact of mental illness on kinships, relationships, and friendships. I definitely want to take our time with this episode, but I'm going to start off by defining mental illness.
Go for it.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, mental illness, sometimes also referred to as mental disorder, is characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior. It is usually associated with distress or impairment in important areas of functioning. That's by World Health Organization. But overall, it's a wide range of conditions that affect mood, thinking, and behavior in layman terms.
Right. And what they mean by affecting various parts of your life, or when they're talking about specific things in your day-to-day, what seems out of routine. So maybe you're not able to go to work, you're not able to take care of your daily living skills, which would be brushing your teeth, cleaning your home, doing laundry, or even being able to go get groceries and things like that. So any type of disturbance at work, at home, for kids at school. And it's usually identified as a disorder if it's occurring in more than one place for the most part.
Yes, and the amount of time also makes it classified as a mental disorder, because you can obviously experience symptoms of depression, but not be not have the disorder of depression. So for depression, when I was recently brushing up on my criteria to meet depression, it said you need to be experiencing these symptoms every day for 2 weeks in order to be classified as depression. What are some signs, if we can speak to, of depression?
A big one is isolation.
Okay.
And withdrawing from things that they previously were super consistent with.
Yes, the little interest in things that you were once interested in.
Apathy.
Yes.
And sometimes some appetite fluctuations.
Right.
Yes.
Eating too much, eating too little, sleeping too much, sleeping too little. These are also symptoms that we can experience because something happens in our life and stresses us out, and it's just this big occurrence. Which sometimes
spills.
say that again.
Frequent crying spills.
Yes. And so these things happen to us sometimes, and when we don't get a grasp on it, and it just becomes so what is the word I'm looking for? Deteriorating?
Oh,
no.
Or exacerbated?
Yeah, if it becomes too much and we can't ever just get back, these are signs that it's okay. These are signs that you should probably go seek mental health care.
Right.
But we're not talking about ourselves. We're talking about people being in spaces where they may see this on people that they love, their partners, their friends, their family members, their children. We want to have a conversation about how those people support the people they love who may be having an occurrence of a mental illness.
Right.
So what are some signs that people can recognize in their family members when they think that, okay, something is off? Like what would they see?
Maybe little Joey always eats his apples, and he hasn't wanted his apples for 2 weeks, but he's also now not wanting to sleep in his own bed, when for the last 2 years he's always been okay with sleeping in his own bed. Or he was excited about going to ride bikes after school, and now he doesn't want to go anymore.
Okay,
That's good.
so those are great examples for children. I'm glad you started with children, because that type, being intentional with learning your child is important, so you can recognize when something is off with your child.
Yes, because children can get depressed even if they have a roof over their head and food and clothes. They can still experience depression
because they're still a human.
Okay, so when that is happening, what advice would you give a parent how to support their child?
I would say just check in with them, check in with their school, check in with other people in the house, and really try to get an idea of what other people are seeing, or if he's maybe talked about these different things with maybe a different parent or sibling, or something's going on at school, which schools are very busy. There are a lot of kids there, and so they don't always call home about every little thing.
Right.
But it may be they did bad on a test, or somebody said something mean to them. They're not usually going to call home if somebody said something mean to your kid, but maybe the teacher noticed.
Right.
So just get more information from the kiddo, from the other people in the kiddo's life. And then if that isn't enough, then maybe seek therapy, play therapy.
Okay. Okay. So we specifically were talking about depression. It sounds like because we're going to talk about a few different ones, but we're not going to go into too much details about all of them. But depression is what you were talking about. So then let's switch to like maybe anxiety, which is sometimes hard to notice in people. Um, and so I'm going to just anxiety is characterized by excessive fear and worry and related behavior disturbances. It's hard to see that in people sometimes. I feel like anxiety comes out as irritability sometimes. I think I said
It
that right.
does.
I'm so country. Sometimes it comes out as that, and sometimes it can come out as just being extremely nervous, or avoidant. Avoidant. How do you support a family member who may be struggling with anxiety?
I think, well, sometimes it's okay to ask people what they need.
That's a good one.
Like, I noticed, like, you either get super quiet in these settings, or like, I noticed that you're shaking. Do we need to take a pause for a second? Kind of similar to your point about checking in, especially if you know the person. Like, some people's anxiety shows up for them physically.
Yes.
Emotionally, you might not readily see it, but if you know the person, sometimes if you're like really close, sometimes it's okay to like touch them, like it's okay, whatever the setting is, right? So it's kind of just being in tune with the people around you if you can be.
Okay.
I like that I really, really like that you said, I noticed this, and that, because you're not making any assumptions
Yes.
Right.
about what's going on or how they're feeling. It's more of an observation, and sometimes they don't notice that they're doing that. And so I think approaching it in that way can let down a person's guard and help us be a little bit less defensive whenever someone is trying to ask, hey, what's going on?
Right. Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are good things you just pointed out. I think this artist's name is Tink. I don't listen to her music. I think that's her name. She was dating Young Berg. That's what I know him as, but I think his name Hitmaker.
Hitmaker.
But what's this people name? What's this boy name? The Breakfast Club, the light skinned boy.
DJ
Man,
Envy?
the light skinned man. DJ Envy, yes.
Oh, okay.
DJ Envy was obviously asking her questions about Hitmaker. And he's obviously, I don't know why anyone would date him, but he was kept asking her questions about the relationship, and Charlamagne noticed that she was struggling. She looked like she was okay, but Charlamagne noticed, and so he told Envy, enough, like stop. She's shaking, but DJ Envy couldn't see her shaking, but she was shaking from just answering the questions because it was such a. I think it was a hard, tumultuous relationship. He denies being in a relationship with her, but they were in a relationship. But Charlamagne noticed, kind of like you just said, like she was visibly shaking under the table while looking like she was well answering his question, but Charlamagne was like, enough, bro. Like, she can't take no more. And I thought that was, I guess, okay for
Wouldn't
Charlamagne
give
to
him
do
credit
that.
for that.
Not okay. That was great for him to do that.
We just don't like Charlamagne. That's but that was incredible for
because
what he did.
I love
that's an example
Charlamagne.
of how we communicate in very different ways. Like you said, she was verbally able to answer, but you
Yes.
really do have to pay attention to the whole person and see what else they're communicating.
Right.
100%. 100%. I'm gonna move on to bipolar. So now I'm just going through different types of mental illnesses. The next one will be bipolar disorder. People with bipolar disorder experience alternating depressive episodes with periods of manic symptoms. This word is probably used on social media so often, well, misused on social media so often.
I'm glad you said that. Yes.
That it's almost just like it's really insensitive the way that you guys misuse bipolar disorder.
And it's stigmatizing.
It's so stigmatizing. During a depressive episode, the person experienced depressed moods, feeling sad, empty, and just irritable, or loss of pleasure and interest in activities. Depression and bipolar can sometimes mirror each other depending on some type of criteria that can distinguish between the two. The mania,
The mania is the main difference.
The mania is the main difference. And so the
depression can look the exact same as it would with just the depression diagnosis.
That's a good point. Say it again. Depression can look the same in bipolar and depression disorder, but the manic symptoms is what separate the two.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So the manic symptoms may include euphoria or irritability, increased activity or energy, or other symptoms such as increased talkativeness, racing thoughts, increased inflated self-esteem, decreased need for sleep, distractibility, and impulsive recklessness. It says that people with bipolar disorder are at risk for suicide more than any other diagnosis. I'm I'm going to now give a definition for schizophrenia. Um, People with schizophrenia have a life expectancy of 10 to 20 years below that of the general population, according to this is World Health Organization. Symptoms may include persistent delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, highly disorganized behavior, or extreme agitation. Both all of these can have
Psychosis.
Psychosis.
psychosis, right?
Right.
Okay, so bipolar disorder and schizophrenia disorder is where it becomes sometimes complicated when people don't want to get help.
Yes.
Having a family member or a boyfriend or girlfriend or a child or a friend who don't want to get help with these type of mental illnesses because they need medication.
Yes.
These type of mental illnesses, and so
These also usually don't come into play until late teen, early 20s.
Right.
facts. But they have actually been saying that they have noticed some signs of schizophrenia in children. They are
Yes,
starting to
I've
say
worked
that.
with some, but it's still late teens that they have noticed. But also, even for bipolar, they don't call it bipolar; they just call it
Mood dysregulation
Yes.
disorder.
Yes.
yes.
Yes, I've seen that in a 12-year-old that I worked with many years ago. It definitely they don't call it that, but you can some of the symptoms still kind of mirror
Absolutely.
that.
Now, I haven't seen schizophrenia start that early. I've only seen it like 17, 16, 17.
I think they're
at
just,
the
I
latest.
don't know if they're having some of the symptoms.
But they won't call it that. Yeah.
No, such as hallucinations would be so positive symptoms are things that are added to your psyche, which would be the hallucinations. And
Right.
let's see if I can or name the hallucinations. There's olfactory hallucinations. I think that's when you're smelling things that are not there. And then there
Visual,
visual hallucinations.
Auditory,
auditory.
And that's when you're seeing things that are not there.
gustatory,
Auditory hallucinations when you're hearing things that are not there. Takesha,
gustatory,
what is that one? Touch? No, that's tactile.
taste.
Taste. That's a hard one. That's taste. And what's the touching one?
Tactile. Right?
I think so. There's a when you feel things touching you or crawling on you. I think it's tactile hallucinations.
Yes.
Those are things. Those are considered
Yes.
positive symptoms because they're added to your psyche. The negative symptoms are when things are taken away, and I'm having a hard time figuring out what that means. The negative symptoms. I think that's like the lapse in time of or being able to respond to people quick as you used to. I think that's considered a negative symptom. It's taken away from your psyche, your ability to respond to people with like fast as you used to. I think
Abnormally absent traits that can include emotional flatness.
yeah.
So what they would call flat affect.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
no type of like personality
Yes.
or anything.
Abolition, severe lack of motivation that can make everyday tasks feel debilitating. Yeah.
So taking away your ability to shower, to want
Right.
to eat,
Yes.
to care for yourself,
Paying
go to
bills,
work.
things like that.
Okay, so when we think about the general population, 1 in every 8 people in the world live with a mental disorder. Mental disorders involve significant disturbance in people's thinking, emotion regulation, and their behavior. They says effective prevention and treatment options exist, but most people do not have access to the effective care. And it's not because we don't exist. That's not the reason. It's almost like it's like the system and the healthcare actually giving people the access to this. It's
Right.
coming a long way, but this was some of the reasons why people don't have access to mental health care because it wasn't necessarily always covered in their insurances.
Correct.
And then
A lot
some
of
people
times.
don't have insurance.
Right.
But in America, I can say that we have been uneducated about how to treat mental health issues in people
Yeah.
and educate people about it. This is not something that we've done a great job at all. So when we see this in people, we almost always call it something different. We don't want to call it mental illness or say that this is what it is. We want to call it something else. How can we support? What tips can we give people to support people with mental illness? And I guess I didn't answer that question, so maybe I'm going to answer it now. Y'all kind of said some of the ways in which we support how people can support their family members or their loved ones with this. Listen and create space for them to be heard and kind of be patient. Educate yourself about mental illness so that you can know what it is and not assume that the person is being lazy, the person is being bad, the person is just needs something that they don't need. Help them with tasks. So ask them if you can help them with cooking and cleaning and doing other chores and things like that. encouraging them to seek mental health care and even try to attend the first appointment with them, normalizing going to talk to a therapist, being active with them and helping them stay consistent with maybe going for walks, or maybe drinking water and eating fruits and vegetables, and then helping them find community outside of you, the peer support and things like that, and setting limits, knowing what you can do for them and knowing what you can't do for them, and then being clear and letting them know what you can and what you can't do for them. What are the challenges to dating or having people in your life who have mental illness who won't get help?
Oh, I think it hinders, unfortunately, because of what you described for, I mean, all of them can be very severe. And I know particularly with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, like you said, those are diagnoses that you can't really go without being on some type of medication management. And so you do experience these different parts of this person, and they can be really hard to manage.
It's really hard to manage.
Especially when they're in an episode. People don't often know what to do with that, really.
And sometimes there is very little that you can do,
Right.
unless the person agrees to help. And that's kind of the sad part of it. Of no matter how much compassion or empathy or patience that you have, eventually this will be, a never-ending merry-go-round if the person doesn't agree to seek treatment, which might mean that they're out of commission for weeks or months at a time when they're not able to fulfill roles that maybe are essential to the family or that they used to be able to fulfill before. But also that adds on to the workload and the responsibility of the other partner, which we already know we have like limited time and space in life right now as it is. So just increase responsibility for your partner whenever you're not caring for yourself.
Yeah. And unfortunately, people don't know, like, where do they go, right? Like, if sometimes people call 911 and then that ends up getting criminalized, or they're just not safe. Right. So it's hard to know what to do.
Right. I'm going to go there.
Okay.
But we were speaking specifically about people who have untreated mental illness and how to support them. Okay. Now, people who are getting help and are taking their medicine, it still can be hard to be there for them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so a lot of times, sometimes people don't want help and they would rather be on the streets and kind of be doing their own thing. And so if you see something on the internet, and like, for example, we've seen something on the internet about somebody being homeless, and so they was obviously related to a famous person, and people was criticizing the famous person, but I'm like, you have no idea. Like, it is not that easy sometimes to show up for them if they don't want the help. And so we have to really educate ourselves on these symptoms and what these people are going through in a way that, not that we weaponize the language or anything, but so that we can be more understanding of what they're going through, and then not judging the family members for maybe, because sometimes they blame the family members that this person is in this position.
Right. But people don't know the full story. They just see the finished product of...
They also don't understand mental illness.
No, not at all. There's compassion fatigue that plays a big part of it, unfortunately. And like T said, like, it's not a lot in place that are readily available to support the caregiver, plus support the person who was undergoing such severe circumstances. And even when you think about the system itself, like, if the person is not harming anybody, you can't say, well, just put them in a facility, or like take away like their ability to pay for things. Like, there's not really, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, there's not really anything in place. You can't just, it can't be involuntary.
It's the most neglected piece of society,
yes,
in my opinion. So if you guys could think maybe like what would be a proactive way in society to handle this from ground up?
I think we have to say the thing out loud. I think we have to stop criminalizing substance abuse and mental illness. And I think we might need more people on the ground, really.
Yeah, I think that we have to start in preschool, in kindergarten.
Yeah.
With so, for example, when we go to school in 7th grade, we take a class on physical health. There should also be a class on mental health and what that means. But also, when we're in the school system is the best place to start with this, in my opinion, because it's the place where you're going to be. The majority of people are going to be there. Every school should have mental health curriculum and mental health first aid to teach people this language, to teach people how to recognize when things are off with themselves, how to recognize when things are off with other people, their loved ones, and also a clear guide on who to call for help, where to go for help.
Right.
The biggest thing is, like you said, people not knowing where to go for help.
Right.
We are living through a mental health crisis right now in this country. I'm pretty sure you guys can go out of your home and get in your car and see somebody struggling with a mental illness on the streets.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Even on social
In your
media.
workplace, in the grocery store.
On the where they've been coming out the most is on the damn airlines.
Yeah.
In the aircrafts. You've been seeing
Yeah.
it. And so a lady, I'm gonna give this story about a lady being on, I think it was, I don't know what airline she was on, and it was 85 weeks ago. And the reason why I know this is because somebody just commented to me about it. But it was last year. This lady was on the airline and she was trying to open the door or kick out the window because she said Jesus was telling her to do so. Now, people were saying she was lying, she was making it up, she was doing all these things. And I'm like, unfortunately, she probably was hearing that because Takesha, is that a command hallucination?
Mm-hmm.
Said Jesus was telling her to get off their aircraft, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so she bit somebody who was trying to stop her. Now, I get it, right? Like, she about to go to jail. But she is. But I'm saying, like, this is unfortunate that it's criminalizing mental illness versus giving her the proper help that she needs.
Right.
So people were saying, like, oh, I'm so sick of y'all bringing Jesus into this and saying this. I'm like, y'all don't. I'm like, this is actually a thing
yes.
Y'all sick of it.
But
People
hold on,
don't try to have command hallucinations.
Right, I'm saying, but we're so uneducated about this type of mental illness that if this was cancer, she was throwing up, they would have a different approach or something to her.
I think it's
because they can see it.
Not educated. Plus, like, people don't have empathy or compassion.
They actually think that people are making these things up, though.
Right, but I'm saying that lacks empathy and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
You've not considered who really thinks that this person did this on purpose. You think she wanted to, like, open an aircraft when it's highest in the air?
Because
Like,
that seems like so much fun.
I
Like,
think that we're in privileged positions if our mind is not betraying us like that.
yes,
because we are, but other people don't
Yes.
see that because again they see it as the norm. People have a difficult time putting themselves
Yes.
in another person's shoe, which, like you said, Britt, that is just lack of empathy. And I think, like you said, Mercedes, if you start earlier, if you start in school, if we educate
Yes.
people on these things, that's not only education about what could happen or what does happen, but it's also a practice in empathy and compassion
Yeah,
because
that's
they're
good.
aware that other circumstances exist outside of their own.
Right.
We
That's
need to
good.
have a better hold on this as a society because people do deserve, like, to feel safe on the aircraft without somebody doing this. And I'm just like, that lady is going to go to jail versus going to get the help she needs. And as a therapist, this is our field. I absolutely understand that what she did was dangerous, but it pisses me off that it's criminalized versus
For sure.
treated with care.
Right. And I mean, yes, you're right. She'll be in the system. The hope is that if whether she has the money to get a good lawyer or gets a good public defender, the hope is that they'll defend her in court to say, like, she needs mental health treatment. That's the
Hopefully.
hope.
But that's just our lack of empathy and compassion, and we don't have reformative justice
Right.
in any
That's
of these
good.
areas. Anytime somebody's
Yes.
punished for wrongdoing, it's never reformative.
Right. Never.
Truly reformative.
Not at
Right.
all.
That's good. Yeah.
So let's talk about mental health emergencies / crisis. Takesha, I know you have experience in this. What is a mental health emergency / crisis?
Oh, so many of them. If somebody is actively suicidal or homicidal, wanting to hurt themselves or someone else, if someone is to a point in their life to where their house is very, very, very unkept, to where
Okay.
it can be a harm to them because they have food that is not good, it's gone bad, or they're still eating it, or the cleanliness is not there at all to where it might impact their physical health. All of these are crises.
Crises. It can be hard for people to see their friends or loved ones this way when you've seen them a different way for so long. So when a person start with these type of behaviors that are completely different than their normal behaviors, people sometimes distance themselves from said individuals. I would actually encourage people to just have your limits, but also try to get that person some help. Try your best to be concerned and let them know that you're there for them, but recognizing those things and not assume that somebody is being lazy because their house is unkept,
Right.
or that they're just, you know, or being a negative person, and you just can't be around that. You can't be around that energy.
Because sometimes it's like the negative, like obsessing, but that if that's all that their mind is giving them, they might be in a
Yes.
constant state of anxiety
Yes.
and depression to where they cannot take care of themselves. They are spiraling.
Yes.
That's not, oh, this person's being negative, I can't have them in my life. That's, this person might be going through a crisis
struggling.
situation.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
for sure. I think that we are. I think that there should be a protocol for calling in mental health crises, because I think that if you are Black and with a mental illness, that your life is in danger sometimes.
Yes.
If you are Black with a mental illness and it's untreated, your life is definitely in
Absolutely.
in danger, because it's criminalized and you are literally incoherent. So you won't be able to comply or do any of those things. But how should people call in a mental health emergency? I have my way that I think it should be done. I don't know if it's a standard way.
Go ahead.
So I think that if you have a family member who may be experiencing some form of mental health crisis or emergency, you should call the police and act. You should call 911 and let them know this what you think is going on. Use mental health crises or emergency and maybe ask if they can send out a mental health deputy versus just a regular
Wellness.
police.
What do they call
Even
it?
though
A
everyone
wellness?
doesn't have mental health deputies.
But even if you do a wellness thing, they still just send regular police. It's not working.
Mental health deputies would be more ideal. So if you do live in a county or somewhere
Yes.
where they do have those,
Right.
then I would definitely suggest using those. But I know every county does not have mental health deputies.
And that mean it'd be a smaller county if they don't have a mental health deputy. If it's a smaller county, correct? If they don't have those
They
type
don't
of
even have
resources.
mental health deputies here.
Yes, they do.
So
Sir,
just the
That's
those aren't
Harris.
deputies. That's the Harris Center. That's therapists.
but no, CERT rides around with Harris County Police. They do.
Okay.
So typically they would call CERT when you say you need a mental health deputy because the therapists ride around with the cop. The only reason why I never did that is because I didn't have time to try to stop a cop from doing something crazy to a client, because that's what's going to happen. We heard the stories of people riding around with that, but the cops need to be trained in mental health treatment anyway. But working when you calling in it, I think you just make sure you use the words mental health and
Put emphasis on that.
put emphasis on it.
Yeah.
And something that I've thought about and kind of seen, not in real life, but what I've seen in like a novel I was reading, is that if you're in a small area, if you're in a subdivision, or if you're in like this town, you can also go let the local police know, this is my family member, this is what they struggle with. Letting people in the community know, it seemed like it may be a HIPAA violation, but it could also save life by saying, this is my daughter, she struggles with this. If you see her out wandering the streets, call me. And then going to the police station and saying the same thing. This is my daughter. This is where she lives. This is what she struggles with, and letting them know some things that maybe she may be having an episode. Doesn't mean she's going to be a danger to you, but you guys could just call me or call another family member or a friend.
So being proactive about it.
Being centering on community, putting that work on community to say, like, this is all our responsibility. Since we all live here, because if the person is being out in the middle of the street having an episode, everybody's now scared, so they're calling the police and they're saying things, but they're not saying this person may be sick or this person may be struggling, and then that can lead to the person being quote unquote in danger or being a danger to themselves and other people, and sometimes it don't work out well in their favor. You guys are pretty
Proactive.
quiet.
That was good. What? We was listening. It's called listening.
No, I said proactive.
Are you unfamiliar with the listening piece?
No.
You gave us
you
your
saying
whole
a lot,
spiel.
yeah.
Right, you gave us your whole spiel. We were listening. No, I think that's a really good approach to have, and I know the same way they have medical bracelets. I haven't seen anything about a universal bracelet for even autism or mental health, but I actually really think I'm about to get it going. I think that's a really great idea, because people pay attention to the medical bracelets whenever something happens. People know. Ambulances know to look at this. Everybody knows to look at this to see what's going on with this person. They don't have this for any mental illness or developmental delays, and that could be a real danger.
It is a real danger. Almost every time when I'm seeing something on the internet and somebody ends up in trouble or something, I'm like, bro, this person is sick. Like, they need help. They don't need prison. And the police need to learn how not to agitate the situation.
That's the thing.
That's what we need. Like, I need them to stop doing it. I just keep thinking about Sonia Massey, obviously, but the fact that sometimes they are aware that the person is going through something and they still will behave like it's a normal situation. So, or I'm like, are these people uneducated or unwilling?
Both.
I would definitely say both. And I think a large part of it, unfortunately, is unwilling because I don't even know how much a training
Yeah.
would do if they just don't have the motivation,
Right.
the will, or the desire to see people as people
Right.
and not treat them in a way that they see is necessary.
How do you guys feel being clinicians who obviously care about this topic and seeing the way it kind of get misconstrued or just criminalized?
Oh, it's frustrating. And it's sad.
I was gonna say, if it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, and especially when you think about, because we all worked at the same clinic before, and just listening to like the caregivers and the stress that they have to go through, like it all ends up being a very unfortunate situation for a lot of people. But when I hear, like you said, like it being criminalized and things like that, it almost makes me wonder, like, when is it going to change? Really, because it's getting worse and worse. Everybody's recording everything. We're exposed to so much trauma at this point. When is the shift? Like, when do we stop and say, can we do things differently?
I think it's going to continue to get worse before we ever try to make a change nationwide. I think because one, the powers that be don't really seem to be invested in this particular part of our society.
Yes.
And I know the politicians are seeing this. I mean, you're seeing this every day on social media and in the streets. Like, people are out here people are unwell.
Yeah. And
But
unfortunately,
they're not getting money from it. There's no
yeah.
upside for them cost benefit wise. Although if they actually looked at the research, they would see that just like universal health care, like if they actually invested more into this piece, they would probably be putting out less money to deal with the aftermath of the crises that inevitably occur.
Yep.
So we work with clients who have, sometimes we work with clients who have some of these disorders. What type of guidance do you guys give them when they ask you if they should disclose this to a new partner, a romantic partner? I've had that question before.
For me, it's always time and place. I don't think you have to come out the gate with it because you don't know this person like that,
Right.
and you don't even know if you like them.
Right.
But I will say, once you've seen them for a while, you see that it might be promising, then it is important to let the person know because this is a part of your life. This is something that you actively have to tend to. It's going to come out at some point. Also, it's not anything to be ashamed of.
Right.
The same way I'm not going to come out the gate and tell you probably all about my family and what they got going on our first couple dates. But eventually, this is a part of who I am and a part of my life. And there's no shame around it. It's just something that you will be exposed to, so that you have the right to decide if you want to engage with it or not.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I typically encourage the same thing because you got to take your time to trust the person that you're wanting to date, really. And like you said, it gives them a choice, right? Not that you're hoping they'll break up with you after the fact, but you do have to be gentle when it comes to stuff like that. And so you want to make sure that the person that you're sharing this with will be supportive in that process.
Okay, I agree with everything y'all just said. What would be challenges of dating somebody who has a mental illness?
Probably some inconsistencies in communication, isolation. Especially if you don't know that's what this person has going on, it will be hard to understand. And especially if you do understand it, you don't often know what to do if the person is also not getting the necessary help. Because treatment teams don't have to be just the psychiatrist and the therapist. It could be your mom, your dad, your cousin, somebody that could be a part of your accountability. What I've helped clients with before is having a safety plan in place, right? So like if they notice that things are about to shift a little bit, they know who they can call or text. Obviously, everybody's not going to be available, but you at the very least have something in place to help sort of mitigate before it goes a little too far.
Okay.
I'd say it's extra hard the same way a chronic illness would be extra hard,
Right.
the same
Okay.
way diabetes would. It just adds another layer. Not that it's harder, because all relationships have their different type of hard. It's just another thing that you just have to be more aware of and more intentional about, whether that's helping somebody pick up their medication or a therapy copay or making sure you're checking in on therapy, or just being more aware of their symptoms the same way you would be more aware of somebody who has diabetes and their symptoms of you haven't checked your blood sugar all day, or hey, we're going on a trip, we need to make sure we plan to have either extra insulin or extra bipolar medication. So it really is just about just being more diligent
Okay.
about that partner.
Okay. I agree with all of that. I don't have anything to add. Okay. So when navigating mental illness within relationships, do you would you guys say there's an element of grief that comes if you've known this person before all of this and then this happens? There's an element of grief.
Absolutely.
1000%.
Anytime there's a shift,
Right.
Anytime there's a
There's
shift.
Especially
grief.
if you don't know, or if signs started to show after like losing a loved one, right? And so this person is different, or it might exacerbate something that they were handling for a long time. So yeah, I can't get in touch with this person that I used to know. So it ends up being a difficult transition.
Yeah, for sure. So when grief is something that I'm glad you brought that up, because grief sometimes can onset depression in such a way that can be so debilitating. The thing about grief is that it doesn't have to ruin your life or your marriage, but it will change you and you'll never be the same. And it can turn into depression. It really can.
which would be natural.
Which would be right. Which would be natural. So depression can be circumstantial, even though the symptoms could be the same as somebody who didn't go through what you went through. But it can definitely be circumstantial. But there is power in the combination of talk therapy, medication, and being physically active. All three, not just one. When you're struggling with depression so intensely, or even any of these things so intensely, it takes more than one thing for you guys to be well and be in recovery.
Right.
And illness management and recovery is possible. So if you are struggling or know somebody who is struggling with a mental illness, there are places here locally that you guys can contact. The main one would be the Harris Center for people who don't maybe have insurance
or income.
or income. But the Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD, that's a quick Google search. There are like 4 clinics here. But if you do have insurance and benefits, you can also just look for a psychiatrist.
Correct.
They are also on Psychology Today, or just do a Google search of psychiatrists near me. Look at the reviews. Just making any type of medical appointment.
Right.
It's the same thing.
And a psychiatric nurse practitioner. That's another option
Yes.
as well.
Just like making any other appointment. Or you could also reach out to a therapist. I have had people reach out to me and they have said, I reached out to you so that you can guide me on a referral to a psychiatrist. And I appreciate
Which
it.
is good.
Yeah.
I appreciated the honesty, and I let them know that if this issue would exceed private practice, then we would have a different conversation. But for now, we met, and I kind of did an assessment, got to know some of their reasons for wanting to see a psychiatrist, and it made sense. I actually liked their approach. The person did their research and said they'd rather talk to a therapist first. I actually appreciated that.
Least restrictive.
Yes.
Right.
And it just showed me that they did their research and they knew they had a lot to talk about and process and wanted to know my opinion about medication. And it worked out.
Yeah.
So
I've had the same experience.
That approach. I said I love that approach. And research does say that usually for severe depression, the best combination is to have a psychiatrist with medication and a therapist.
Right.
So trying one or the other may not be super successful. Although if you are going to start with something, I would say start with therapy first, just because you don't know what you need to talk about or what might be helpful, or if you can go ahead and start implementing some of the skills and processing things to where you might not need the medication.
right. But therapy is only appropriate if you are coherent. If you're in a
This
mental
is
health
very true.
crisis or you're untreated for a mental illness and it has been months or years, you definitely probably got to start with a psychiatrist.
Yes.
Right. And also keep in mind, like your physical health also plays a part, and often that has to be ruled out to get
Of
an
course.
appropriate diagnosis. So, like if you have a hyperthyroidism plays a big part in anxiety. Yeah, I'll say that.
No, true. Physical health does have to be ruled out. And because sleep is something
That is a big
that
one.
can make people have some onset, some hallucinations and stuff like that. Sleep is so important. I can't express that enough. And once I learned that the lack of sleep, you get little sticky substance on your brain that contribute to hallucinations and you being delirious, I'm like, yeah, y'all better get some sleep.
Get some sleep, y'all.
Get some sleep. But so the purpose of this episode was to kind of educate about mental illness, not mental health, but mental illness, and to also kind of give some guidance on how to support people in your life who may be struggling with a mental illness and how you can support yourself and educate yourself, and also where to go for help. Some tips on that. So we'll wrap this session up. You guys have anything to leave the people with?
No, that's it.
Make sure that you're addressing it all without any shame or blame around
100%.
medication or needing treatment. This mental illness isn't anything that's anybody's fault. Sometimes
Not
it
at
just
all.
happens. Give yourself some grace,
Right.
because no one taught you how to be a caregiver or be in relationship with people who have a mental illness. So it can be hard and difficult. Give yourself grace. Give the person grace,
100%.
and just try to take steps forward for the betterment of both of you.
Yeah.
You can live well despite having a mental illness.
Absolutely.
You really can. You can lead a full life. You really can.
Yep.
Brittany, anything to add?
No, I think the only thing I will add, and maybe I missed it if you already said it to you, or maybe you said it, but like if you are the caregiver, it is also important to take care of yourself as well.
Oh, yes.
You can have a therapist to work through. Two things can be true. You can be stressed about it, but you also still want to be there for that person. So
And
Yes.
NAMI
you
is
also
a
have to
great,
take care of yourself.
Yes.
and NAMI is a great resource for
NAMI.
caregivers or people who
That-
are
I'm
in
glad you said
relationship
that.
with individuals struggling with mental illness.
Call out a few of those. So that's NAMI, and there's a NAMI here in Houston.
Yeah,
National
NAMI.
National Alliance of Mental Illness. That's NAMI. Something is missing. It's not coming to me. Greater Houston.
Yes.
Greater Houston. The Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD. It's one more. Mental Health America.
Mental
Yes.
illness.
Mental Health America. So all those, I think that's a local one here too.
Right.
These are all local organizations that can help you and guide you with navigating a relationship, navigating a family member who have a mental illness, and just educating yourself and how to get involved and how to get them support. Okay. With that, go love yourself.
Go love yourself.
Go love yourself.